Yo, what is going on, guys? My name is Liam Ash. Welcome back to another Overwatch League video, and today we are back making another top 10 players that have played on a certain team. And the team we are going to be talking about today is the Boston Uprising. I feel like Boston Uprising is a fun topic to talk about because we know the amount of players that have been on this team 2018 till today, and there's been a lot of fantastic players in there from the start and not so many good ones through the middle. But there's been good ones today too, so that's a good sign. So let's go and jump right into the list. Let's go and jump right into it. And at number 10, it is going to be Punk. Punk joined the team in season 3, and he really helped the team out for just a couple weeks. There was a honeymoon phase, and right after that phase ended, it just was the normal Boston Uprising. It happens sometimes. I guess it happened for the Boston Uprising with Punk on the team, and now that Punk is with the Boston Uprising still and is developing with like players like Stam1, Valentine, 937, Faith, Myanbong again. Punk has really grown into that player. We saw him in that honeymoon phase last year and showing that he's always been good, even in contenders, and it's coming through on this season of the Boston Uprising, even with the head coach Lori coming in. And you see the amount of impact Punk is having in the game with Stam1, especially recently. Now, yes, Boston Uprising is still a very inconsistent team, goes up and down all the time, but you see it with Punk a lot more this season. He's way more consistent. He brings a lot to the team and even has better performances than Gableshe at some moments, but we still have not seen Gableshe play a lot just yet, where I feel like that is a fair argument right now. Now to number 9, it is going to be I'm 37. It was really weird to rank I'm 37 and Valentine upcoming in this list because I'm 37 and Valentine have both been very inconsistent. I feel like the start of the season, I'm 37 was a little bit more inconsistent at the start. Not as many good plays compared to Valentine, which it kind of already confirms that 8 is going to be Valentine. But number 9 is going to be I'm 37. Now I will say recently I'm 37 is picking it up a lot on the hit scan area with the Kree and the Widow, the Tracer occasionally. He's picking it up recently. He's looking good so far this season of the Boston Uprising. And I'm very interested to see how he'll perform the rest of the season. You know, the season almost is over if you have not seen the schedule. But I think I'm 37 has shown that he's still Overwatch League level, and he is so far doing a great job on the Boston Uprising. He needs to be a little bit more consistent. I think he'd be one of the better players that have played on the Boston Uprising. And like I said earlier, number 8 is going to be Valentine on the Boston Uprising. Now, Valentine has always been a very interesting player so far this entire season of the Overwatch League for the Boston Uprising. He's been very inconsistent, but has been way more consistent than I'm 37. Whereas Valentine has shown occasionally fantastic performances on certain heroes in the game. And also heroes like Tracer has been his weakest hero so far in the season. And he played a decent amount at the start of the year, maybe like 2 to 3 months. Then I'm 37 started playing it. And even Valentine still plays it here and there. And it has improved. And we've seen massive amounts of improvement with Valentine throughout the entire season with almost every hero he's played, especially on ones like Echo occasionally, and all around his projectile hero play has gotten way better throughout the entire season so far. And let's hope it gets even better, because so far I think Boston Uprising is kind of on an upward trend right now, but we'll see what happens with players like Valentine, I'm 37 soon. They have been very inconsistent, but when they do pop off, they are doing such a good job that game or week or month. Now the number 7 is going to be Stam1, and I think Stam1 has been one of the more consistent parts of Boston Uprising this entire season. Now I saw a lot of people hate on Stam1 at the beginning of the season, which I still understand majority of it. Yes, there was some moments where Stam1 was not performing well, but Stam1 was actually one of the better performances on this team at the start of the year with his main tank play. He was playing with, you know, Punk really well, I'm 37 well occasionally, but those players did not execute on this plan as you saw, because Stam1 was getting the space for the team, jumping in, placing the bubbles at the right time. I think Stam1's been fine the entire season, and you still see the same sort of play style even today with the Boston Uprising, and it's still working in a way. It's still fine. Stam1's still playing the same that he has been since the start of the year, and I think we'll still see that improvement with Stam1 throughout the rest of the season. And I think he has been one of the better players so far for the Boston Uprising of all time with his main tank play, especially on the Winston. Now 6 up is when we get into the players that almost everyone knows about back in 2018 and even one recently, and that's really it. It's just the normal kind of season 1 Boston Uprising for the rest of the list. Now to number 6, it is going to be Neko. I feel like a lot of people may have forgotten about Neko being on this team because AimGod joined the team and he was better than Neko. But Neko was a big part of the Boston Uprising in the early stages of the league with his surprisingly fantastic flexport play on the Zen and Ana back in the day in 2018, and he was ranked I think around top 10 statistically, maybe even top 5 with his play back in 2018, and then he did join the Toronto Defiant in 2019. he did not do so good that year. But on the Boston Uprising year, he did a fantastic job making a name for himself because he also was one of those players that were kind of unknown, and he made a name for himself that year. But unfortunately, he did get replaced by the number 5 spot. Number 5 is going to be Aim God. Aim God did come in over Neko. A lot of people were also thinking, who was this guy? No one's ever heard of Aim God back in the day, and he was just instantly better than Neko. He was very aggressive, played with Gamsu very well, especially even Striker. They were a fantastic duo of how aggressive they were with his Ana playstyle, the nade spots he got, and the nanos back on Boston Uprising Season 1. He did end up staying in the league for a decent amount of years on the Washington Justice, and he did a good job there too, a little bit. Not as good as his Boston Uprising years. He did have some toxicity issues here and there internally, but it did not last a long time. It was just like here and there occasionally. But I think when you look at both of the flex sports, Aim God and Neko, Aim God was the better one for the Boston Uprising, so I had to rank him above Neko. Now to number 4. It is actually Myanbong, who joined in Season 3. We all knew how good this guy was going to be, and he still popped off being one of the better flex sports of the entire league in Season 3, even on the bottom of the rankings on the Boston Uprising back in that season. And now even on Season 4 of the Overwatch League on the Boston Uprising, Myanbong is still popping off even better this year with his Ana playstyle, and occasionally he has some of his Zen and bad plays coming out, but mostly his Ana, and everyone knows his Ana is fantastic. That's almost a lot of Flexport's best hero is going to be Ana, and you see that with Myanbong, even in some of the most recent games of the Boston Uprising with his Ana play. It has been fantastic positioning wise, nade wise. He has been such a good part for the Boston Uprising this entire season, and even Season 3 where it wasn't that good of a year and they're at the bottom of the standings. Now on to number 3, it is going to be Gamsu. Gamsu was such a fantastic part of this team back in Season 1. Once again, one of those unknown players. All of Season 1 kind of was all unknown. Gamsu was one of them, and a lot of people didn't know what to expect of this main tank, and he came in being one of the best main tanks instantly. I'm pretty sure this guy was a top 5 back in the day. Him and Note were such a fantastic duo, and we even saw that come through even in Season 3, the Fuel. They were such a good duo, and every time they were kind of broken up, I want to say Gamsu did a good job on the Shanghai Dragons the year after, whereas Note did look kind of up and down a little bit in Season 2 for the Boston Uprising, but as soon as they came back together in Season 3 of the Fuel, they looked better. But it's been a decent amount of time since Boston Uprising Season 1 happened. There was not many teams, the competition wasn't as high as it was Season 3, so they are going to look worse that year. But Season 1 was fantastic for these guys. They had such a good playstyle together, very aggressive, and it just worked with the team they had. You had players like Striker, you had players like Mistakes, who was good too, you had Aim God, Neko, and you even had Kelix, who was really good in that time of the Boston Uprising 2, but still was not one of the best main sports. Kelix was all around decent back in Season 1. And speaking of the other tank player, Note, he is going to be the number 2 spot for this team. Note was also a really big part for the Boston Uprising, and I ranked him higher because he stayed on the Boston Uprising a little bit longer in Season 2 and still had solid performances. They weren't as strong as the Season 1 days because he just straight up wasn't with Gamsu. You had another different main tank that was Fusions, and there was a lot of main tank issues at the start of the year too for Boston Uprising, so Note was all over the place sometimes, but he still was solid. And then he ended up getting traded to the Dallas Fuel and had a decent year there with the team. It wasn't top tier, but it was decent. But Note had all around a good time, a good career on the Boston Uprising. I think he definitely deserves to have the number 2 spot because he was so consistent. That guy had some of the most craziest plays back in Season 1 and even 2 for his time being. I think he deserves to be number 2. I think a lot of people could argue with the 2 and 3 spot if they wanted to. It doesn't affect that much because they're both such a good level back in that day. Now on to number 1, it's an obvious, it's Striker. Talk about aggressive plays, talk about a very surprising player who was actually very unknown. I know I've said that a lot throughout the entire list, but that was true back in Season 1. A lot of these players were unknown back in Season 1, and Striker was one of them, and he ended up coming through instantly being one of the best tracers, one of the best hits game players in the league, competing with players like Carpe, who had a big name beforehand in the Overwatch League, and came through, and Striker was competing against those guys. You had Fleta, you had Prophet. Striker was fantastic against these players that, we never heard of him before, coming against these top tier players we have heard for years. And yes, there was also kind of like Aim God, some internal issues here and there, but I think when it just comes to it, Striker has to be number 1. He helped this team in Stage 3, the golden stage, all stages for the Boston Uprising, getting them far, getting them up the standings a lot too. And as soon as they lost Striker, we all know what happened. I mean, they lost their entire Season 1 roster, got rid of it basically, traded to different teams, and ended up kind of going downhill from there. But they have so far a good Season 4. But Striker did end up going to the San Francisco Shock and had back-to-back championships. And also on top of this, he is now retired, which sucks to see. He may come back, who knows, but he has retired so far. He had a great year, a fantastic year on the Boston Uprising back in season 1, and then proceeded to have great years on the Shock years later. And I think all around he's been one of the best players we've had in the Overwatch League, and I would say he was number 1 for 2 to 3-ish years, I would say. Now that is going to be it for the top 10 players that have played on the Boston Uprising. If you want me to talk about another team, put it in the comments below if you want to. And that's going to be for me. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys want to stay more in tune to Overwatch League news and Overwatch League stuff in general, don't forget to subscribe down below. Also, don't forget to join my Discord down below as well. And don't forget my Twitter and my Twitch. And don't forget to hit that bell. And don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe down below. And I'll see you guys on the next one.